In the early 1900s, a boy named Morton Freedgood fell in love with motion pictures amid the most unlikely of settings. The scene, Morton later recalled, was our second-floor apartment in a six-story building on Nagle Avenue, 200 yards beyond the Dyckman Street station of the IRT, where the subway, like some giant segmented worm, suddenly emerges, half-blinded from its tunnel, into the bright sparkle of daylight. The Freedgoods were the quintessential immigrant family. Morton's mother was Ukrainian, the oldest of 9 brothers and sisters. His Russian father was a sharp dresser and liked to dance. He was also mysterious. Morton never learned what his father did for a living. Inwood was located on the extreme northern tip of Manhattan. The subway had arrived just a decade before, and much of the region was still undeveloped. Farmland, cows, horses grazing in fields of wildflowers below the elevated subway lines. Dreamlike. Inwood, according to Morton, was a lost world, a gift from a God acutely sensitive to the needs of little boys. You could wander its terrain for hours, absolutely insulated from the life of the city, from duties and repressions. It was my treasure island, my far west, my Spanish Main, my Himalayas, and my Africa. Morton and his boyhood friends were especially attracted to the outdoor film production lot several blocks from his apartment. Early into the 20th century, before production moved to Hollywood, New York filmmakers churned out silent movies from a makeshift studio atop a boiler factory on West 56th Street and 11th Avenue. This early soundstage of the independent motion picture company, later Universal, was well suited to interior shots. But when producers needed to film a wild and woolly western, the crew headed to northern Manhattan, where the dirt roads, hills, and trails could still pass for the American West. As early as 1909, IMP constructed an outdoor set on Dyckman Street, near Broadway. Their stock company included an impressive roster of silent film stars, who included the girl with the curls, America's sweetheart, the queen of the movies, actress Mary Pickford, and Florence Lawrence, often referred to as the first movie star, and the energetic Irish-born actor Owen Moore. He appeared in some 279 films, including Redemption at Riverton, which co-starred, once again, Florence Lawrence. IMP's A-list also included actor-director Tom Ince, the so-called father of the Western. He was responsible for some 800 films. And, of course, William King Baggett, the king of the movies, the most photographed man in the world. The man whose face is as familiar as the man in the moon. Baggett was America's first publicized leading man. In the summertime, on their Dyckman Street lot, the independent motion picture company managed to turn out 2 single reels a day. A reporter for Billboard magazine later described the scene. Residents of the northern end of Manhattan might scoff at the suggestion that less than 2 decades ago their neighborhood had a touch of frontier life, with cowboy and Indian costumes to be seen there. Nonetheless, one of the earliest exterior locations for motion pictures was a place known as Dyckman's Hill, where Western thrillers were ground out. A handicap was the Broadway streetcar lines. The trolley poles of that time, tradition has it, were hidden behind teepees or some other artifice. But the cars had a habit of getting within the camera's scope, and there was no way to camouflage them. Witnesses to this pioneering uptown film set claimed that Wallace Reed, described as the greatest on-screen lover of all time, was discovered on the Dyckman Street lot. It was his duty to watch for approaching streetcars and warn the director so the latter could halt activities while they passed. It was a curious place to spend one's youth. You never know who you might encounter. A good number of actors and directors made the uptown neighborhood their home. After all, the rent was cheap, and it saved them a commute from downtown. Director Joseph Montgomery Levering, who once worked with Cecil B. DeMille, lived in a rented apartment inside 518 West 204th Street with his wife, actress Marion Swain, who herself starred in some 65 silent hits, including Matrimony's Speed Limit and A House Divided. Actor Henry Pemberton, a leading man and film heavy, lived with his wife, Kathleen, inside 117 Sherman Avenue. The Pembertons shared their apartment with director William Haddock, nicknamed Silent Bill, for the 88 silent films he directed. Actor Harold Vermilia lived at 656 West 204th Street. He's best known for the film Sorry, Wrong Number. Then there was Kentucky-born director Dallas Fitzgerald at 221 Sherman Avenue, who once told a reporter that the public likes pictures made outdoors. So many characters. In the delis, coffee shops, and saloons, one might encounter Inwood residents Yul Brynner, Walter Downing, Warren Cook, Milton Wallace, or even the soon-to-be famous Edward Van Sloan of 230 Seaman Avenue, later known for his role as vampire hunter Professor Abraham Van Helsing, opposite Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was over. By 1920, apartment buildings covered the old movie locations. The moving picture folks moved briefly to Fort Lee, New Jersey, before permanently relocating to California. But the films? Well, they lived on in the movie palaces erected in this short-lived Hollywood on the Hudson. You see, once upon a time in Inwood, there were several movie theaters. The oldest, the Dyckman Theater, was located on West 207th Street and Sherman Avenue. When this massive theater opened in 1916, the neighborhood was still so rural there was literally corn growing out back. The Dyckman initially offered vaudeville shows, in addition to moving pictures. The one-screen theater had 1,700 seats. The Dyckman, later absorbed by Lowe's, was destroyed in a 1962 fire. Several blocks to the south, the Lowe's Inwood Theater sat proudly on Dyckman Street, near Post Avenue, next to Woolworth's Five and Dime. To say the lobby was magnificent doesn't quite do it justice. The opulent theater was designed by Eugene DeRosa and featured 1,874 seats on one floor with no balcony. The Lowe's was one of dozens of theaters designed by the Italian-American architect during the Roaring Twenties. By the 1940s, a third theater, the Alpine, opened on the south side of Dyckman Street, just east of Broadway, and introduced a new generation of moviegoers to the big screen. There, in the darkness, later generations experienced such modern classics as Jaws. Today, only memories remain. The theaters of Inwood's youth are gone. A McDonald's now occupies the site of the Alpine. But what became of Morton Freedgood, the young lad from the beginning of this tale, who grew up in a second-floor apartment, 200 yards from the Dyckman Street subway station? It turns out Morton was a quick study. He changed his name to John Gooday and wrote the classic New York City heist film, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Not bad for a kid from Nagle Avenue.
seems so quiet up here.
Oh, it's like heaven with earmuffs. I wake up some mornings, I have to pinch myself in the ass.
What's it called again?
Ass.
No.
No.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. No, it's called Inwood.
Right.
Like Hollywood without the Holly.